I welcome you for this subjects organic farming for sustainable agricultural production. So, today's lecture 9 organic farming and climate change. So, in this lecture we will be explaining the impact of climate change on food grain production in general and particularly for the countries located in tropical and subtropical belt like Indian condition. And the next lecture we will discuss the how organic farming can be practiced to mitigate the climate change or as an adaptation to climate change. So, if you see the climate change, what is climate change? This climate change may refer to a change in average weather condition or in the time variations of weather within the context of longer term average condition, or you can say climate change is a change in the usual weather found in a place. This could be a change in how much rain a place usually gets in a year, or it could be a change in place usual temperature for a month or season. So, as you see, there is a rising temperature due to rising concentration of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. If you see the how temperature rising past years from 1900 as we project up to 2100, and you can see here there is a constant rising in temperature, and this is the scenario for the constant carbon dioxide if there is no increase in carbon dioxide level. And these are the emission scenarios, either the low growth, that is a B1 scenario, or the high growth, that is A2 scenario, and the moderate growth A1B scenario based on the carbon dioxide emission. So, with these scenarios it is predicted that temperature is expected to increase by 1.1 to 6.4 degrees Celsius by the year 2100 based on a range of emission scenarios, that is either the low growth or the high growth from B1 to A2 scenario. With sustainable development in effect from the year 2000, the carbon dioxide will increase by 45% to 110% by 2030, along with 0.2 degrees Celsius warming per decade. Increase in number of heavy precipitation events along with prevalence of droughts. As you know, the climate change means, so there is a rising temperature, as you see the global surface temperature is increasing, and the rainfall variability, we receive the increasing number of high precipitation events. So, that causes the soil erosion, soil degradation, and also the floods. And if you see the future climate predictions as compared to the base year 1961 to 90, the rising temperature all over the globe is up to 1 degree Celsius in 2020 as compared to the base year 1961 to 90. If you see the rising temperature in 2050, this is more than 2 degrees Celsius all over the world. Similarly, there is variation in precipitations. So, in some locations there is increasing and some locations there is decreasing precipitations there in 2020 or in same 2050. So, so there is the rainfall variability is there from location to locations, and temperature is rising in all locations in future years. So, estimates of future levels of carbon dioxide that shows in the year 2000 it was about 370 ppm, and year 2010 to 2015 it was around 388 to 398 ppm, and 2050 to 2060 is projected is around 463 to 623 ppm, and 2100 it is around 478 to 1099 ppm. And if you see the global warming due to the increase in greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere. So, among the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide is the major one. The carbon dioxide is around 55%, followed by chlorofluorocarbons, that is 25%, methane 15%, and the nitrous oxide, this is 6%. So, these greenhouse gases are necessary to maintain the temperature on the earth and to make the life possible on the earth due to the presence of greenhouse gases. So, that receives the long wave radiations and makes the atmosphere warming and make the life and the plants, human beings possible in the world. If you see the rising temperature from 1880 beyond 2000, you can see. So, there is a constant increase in temperature from the past years, and it is expected to increase in the future. And if you see last 100 years from 1906 to 2005, the temperature has increased by 0.6 to 0.9 degree Celsius. And interestingly, the rate of increase in temperature is almost double in the last 50 years. And as there is a constant increasing temperature, the global surface temperature, it will affect the agricultural productions. So, how the temperature or the carbon dioxide or the variability in rainfall is going to affect the agriculture. So, the factors that will be influenced as alternation in temperature and rainfall cycle, it will have impact on soil quality. As you see, because of the precipitations and the temperature, and there is a increasing intensity of high precipitation events. So, that may cause the soil erosion or the soil degradations and loss of the soil quality. And moreover, the increasing carbon dioxide concentration and the temperature may also influence soil chemical properties and the soil microbial population inside. Of course, the emergence of pests and diseases, as the carbon dioxide content is increasing and consequent there is a rise in temperature. So, that may influence the emergence of different pests and diseases, and the problem is very severe in the tropical and the subtropical countries, where the temperature is already high, and any further rise in temperature that may increase not only pest and disease, of course, the weed population. And increase in flood risk and the flood hazards, as we discussed now, because of increasing number of high intensity precipitations. So, that may cause flood risk, may cause the floods, flash flood, and sometimes there may be drought as well. So, that will have the heat stress and the drought stress on the plant body. And from the experimental observations, as a phase experiment, that is a free air carbon dioxide enrichment experiment, where we are injecting carbon dioxide to the atmosphere as per the rule. So, for every 75 ppm increase in carbon dioxide concentration, rice seed is increases by 0.5 ton per hectare. At the same time, for every 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature, rice yield is decreases by 0.6 ton per hectare. So, that means the increasing yield with rising CO2 concentration and decreasing yield with rising temperature. That means, the positive effect of carbon dioxide is nullified with the consequent rising temperature. And see the projected impact of global warming on food sector. So, the food productions or the agricultural productivity is likely to be reduced in tropical and the subtropical countries for even 1 degree Celsius rise in temperature. That means, the tropical and subtropical countries, the crops are grown with under the high temperature. So, if there is any increase in temperature even for 1 degree, the agricultural productivity is likely to be affected. And the most of the countries located in tropical and subtropical belts are developing countries. They have the less adaptive capacity to climate change. On the other hand, the temperate climates and the countries located in high latitude, for those countries they may experience the benefits of the high temperature. The yield may increase if the temperature increases up to 2 degrees Celsius. However, the further rise in temperature beyond 2 degrees Celsius is likely to have detrimental effects or the adverse effect on crop yield of those countries. Similarly, if you see the water, there is a significant decrease in water availability in many areas, and of course, there is sea level rise and that threaten many cities, and also that brings the salinization of the coastal area and degradation of this land quality. And ecosystem, so there is a damage to coral reefs, so rising number of species extinction from the oceans, then extreme weather events. So, there may be forest fire, droughts and floods. So, we are also facing in Indian continent same problem, because in some seasons we may have the long dry spell that brings drought, especially for the rice crops which is grown during the monsoon periods, southwest monsoon during July to December. So, if there is a dry spells even for 1 week or 10 days, the crop is really likely to be affected. And sometimes there is flood because of the high intensity precipitations. So, the flood also that makes damage to the crop. And there is a large scale shift in the climate systems as we see. So, if you see the effect of climate change as a forecasted using different scenarios of climate change on food grain production of the world. So, different CO2 concentration, that is either the 810 ppm, 709, 527, that is based on different scenarios. And from this table you can see that yield of the developed country that is expected to increase in future climate scenarios, that increase may be up to 8%. At the same time, the yield of developing countries that is expected to decrease with in future scenarios, and the decrease may be up to 7%. So, there is a difference in the yield in developed and the developing world, and if you see the world food productions that ultimately decreases by 5% because of the difference in the developed and the developing country food production. If see the land utilizations, the soil fertility and if see all over the world, the soil fertility is moderate range, either moderate or high. But you see the agricultural yield in India and these African countries is very low in spite of the moderate soil fertility. So, this indicates there is no proper utilization of the land. Land utilization is the issue. As you see, the yield is very low in those countries like Indian continents or the African continents, though this soil fertility at moderate level. So, that indicates that says about the proper land utilizations, that means proper management of the soils could be done to enhance the production level. So, land is underutilized. At the same time, as we are discussing the earlier classes, there is rising populations. So, there is 1 billion population in 1930. So, the population is rising with time, and we can expect around 9 billion population by 2050. So, this is a great challenge, how to feed the growing population in a sustainable environment. So, so that means the food security is a issue in the future climate scenarios. If you see of the food security, how the climate change and the food security has 4 major components, that is food availability through production and trade, stability of food supplies, access to food and actual food utilization. So, these are the 4 major components of food security. If the 4 components are satisfied, then you can say the globe or the nation is secure in the food. So, that means why is a food availability means food availability depends upon the production. There should be sufficient productions to meet the demand of the populations, that is the food availability. Stability in food supply, that means the food should be supplied, there should be international trade. The suppose some locations there is a deficit in food production and some locations produce more of rice, some location may produce more of wheat. So, there should be a supply of food from the high producing area to the low producing area depending upon the demand. So, there is stability of food supply should be there. And third one, access to food, that means every person should have access to food, they can get the food. Even now you can find some locations in Africa, you can say in India also people have no access to food, they do not get a square meal also. That means, so that is even though we are sufficient in food grain productions, but many people they are deprived and they are living in hunger. So, that means access to food should be there. And the fourth one, food utilization, that is very important. Even though if you satisfy the all 3, there is food productions, that means availability, there is food supply and there is everybody's access to food, then what is the food utilizations? Food utilization means how the food is utilized in your body, in human body. That means it needs a balanced diet, not only carbohydrate. Suppose everybody gets carbohydrate, rice, plenty of rice or plenty of wheat. So, you may not have a healthy human being having only carbohydrate. That means you need carbohydrate, you need protein, you need minerals, vitamins. So, these combinations of food or the balanced diet can make a healthy body. That is what you say food utilization. If a child takes only carbohydrate, the carbohydrate may not be utilized in the body. For proper utilizations, you need some proportion of proteins, some proportion of vitamins and minerals, then the carbohydrate can be utilized in the body. So, that is what say actual food utilizations. So, for this you need a balanced diet. This is what say food security. So, the climate change is likely to influence, likely to have impact on food security. Then besides climate change, the factors may cause food security problems are regional conflicts and the change in international trade agreement and policy, because government policy, and it may happen there may be the disease outbreaks, infectious disease or other social factors, they may influence the food security in long run. So, how the climate change that may impact food security? The projections of undernourishment depend on climate impacts and also on economic development, technical conditions and population growth. So, the report from the UN says that at the beginning of the millennium, between 1800 and 900 million people were at risk of hunger, and most of the people lived in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. Economic growth and slowing population growth can significantly reduce the number of people at risk of hunger. However, in a pessimistic scenario with strong global warming, high population growth and no carbon dioxide fertilization effects, the number of additional people at risk of hunger may be as high as 500 to 600 million by 2080. So, this is highly alarming. So, to decrease the number of people in hunger in the face of in the view of the climate change and the population growth. So, you need to have the technology, the technological interventions, you need to have the adaptation strategies, how to minimize the adverse impact of climate change on food grain production. At the same time, agriculture is also contributing to climate change. We can say that two way, agriculture is a victim of climate change as well as cause of climate change. So, being a victim of climate change, we need to have adaptation technologies, how to minimize the adverse impact of the climate on agricultural production. At the same time, we should have the technological interventions or the breakthrough technologies, how to mitigate the climate change. As we are discussing, organic farming is a candidate which can mitigate the climate change, that can reduce the emission of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. So, with this, there are many challenges before the farmers. So, being a farmers working in the field in harsh climate, so he faces a lot of challenge. That means to have a better production or to have a quality production, you can say organic farming that gives better quality. There are several other factors also, those influence quality in the field level management, you can say. So, what time the weather parameters also, if there is high solar radiations or the low solar radiations, that also influence the crop productions as well as quality. So, the nutrient managements, the atmospheric weather parameters and the weather parameter, also time of planting or the time of sowing of the crop, that also indicates the role of the weather parameters. If you sow right time, the crop may get the optimum weather parameters for a better growth and the quality. If there is a delay in planting time, either the early planting or the late planting, it not only affects the production, but also affect the product quality. The product quality get deteriorated due to the environmental parameters. So, for a farmer, the input that should be available on time. But unfortunately, in our conditions, so many of the locations the input means the seeds, fertilizers or the new materials, input materials are not available on time to the farmers. And good quality inputs, good quality seeds, the seeds having the high production capacity under stress conditions even, and the seeds that is resistant to many pests and diseases, those type of quality seeds should be available to farmers on time. Then of course, the climate change, as you see the climate change, that is one of the threats to agricultural productions. So, how more than climate change, the climate variability, because if you see the rainfall we receive almost similar amount of rainfalls in every year, but there is a uneven distribution, sometimes there may be flood, sometimes there may be drought. So, we should have a technology to manage or to counteract the climate variability and to manage the food protections in adverse weather condition. Then of course, there is other factors, shrinking farmland, soil erosion and degradations as we discussed, pest and disease outbreak due to climate change, drought, floods and droughts, this is also associated with climate change. And the farmers are very poor farmers, they have taken debts, loans and mortgage. So, they do commit suicide. So, in case there is a crop failure and there is unpredictable rainfalls, so natural calamities. So, these are the some of the conditions, the external conditions which influence the production at the farm levels, and most of them are driven by the climate and the climate change and the climate variability or the climate change. So, that if you have a balance, so we need the economic development should go on. So, we cannot sacrifice the economic development, that should progress, and so because of development and there is climate change. So, they are linked. So, because of the economic progress, development, that brings the emission of greenhouse gases and that brings climate change. So, we cannot see them as independent. For a sustainable growth, for a sustainable productions, for a sustainable society, there is an emerging viewpoint, it should together climate change and development should go parallelly, because climate change, there is change in climate or the climate variability, and the development has to come up, because we cannot stop development. So, development should progress. So, at the same time we should look for the integrated climate change and sustainable development strategy. So, that means there is climate change and there is sustainable development. So, looking at as we are discussing earlier classes also. So, how we can bring our package the production package or the production technology, so that we can go on increasing productions even under the pressure of the climate change, even though there is rising temperature, our production level should go on increasing. We cannot sacrifice yield. At the same time, we need a better quality of the foods for a healthy living. We need in healthy society, healthy living. So, that talks about sustainable. So, friends, so this is about the climate change impacts on food productions, and as you see, so it indicates, so there is a negative impacts. Climate change is affecting the food production adversely, but we need to come out, we need to have the technology to minimize the adverse impact of climate change and food production. At the same time, we will discuss in the next lecture how organic farming plays a role in as a climate change mitigation. Thank you. Yeah.